Peace, everybody. How y'all doing? It's your boy Aseer the Tears. We're here on this beautiful Wednesday morning. We definitely want to give respect and praise to the ancestor that we left, Dr. Sabi. Also, we want to give respect and praise to all the ones that left before him, Dr. Sabi, Francis Cress Wilson, Steve Coakley, Khalid Mohammed, Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. Ben, Dr. Delbert Blair. Who else we missing? Um, Anybody else that I forgot, less the honor dead. But it really shows me, this Sabi situation really showed me that the conscious community, as we understand it, really exists solely in consciousness, because there's so many discrepancies and things like that now in what happened with the brother, which is exactly what happened with brother Steve Coakley, which is exactly what happened with Van Sertima and Dr. Ben. Like, there's all of these different, what I'm seeing is that our elders are now in a position, where they have now started to return. So now that they're returning, what's happening is that because our community is not as tight-knitted as we want it to be, or we fronting like it is, they're basically being taken out. And there is no infrastructure within our community that can actually help investigate these things and set everything up. So that was a wake-up call for me, because as somebody that came through one of the last people who came through the master apprentice line, meaning that I was handed the baton by brother Bobby Hemmett, you know what I mean, and then the Valentines and these type of people. I was the last generation of people like that. Everybody else that started coming up had no real direct connection to none of these elders and none of these ancestors. They wasn't going to none of these lectures and stuff we used to throw at LIU and all these different colleges and Hunter and all that. None of these people was there. So all these dudes is like Johnny. All of these dudes is basically like Johnny come lately, and they're putting themselves in such a position to be leaders for a community that really has no means of protecting its elders, has no means of protecting its scholars. So as somebody who, you know, does that and is scholarly in my dissertations, it gave me a wake-up call as to say what it is that I should expect or not expect from the so-called conscious community, because it's sad the fact that we really, as a GDP right now, just as a conscious community alone, on a GDP basis, based upon the years that started from all the way back to Brother Dawood time to now, being in situations where you have all of these people, they've generated, conscious community generated over $175 million, easy, over the years that it's been in so-called existence. But in terms of us actually seeing that buying power turn into something, we don't. All we have is, the closest thing we have is you know, pseudo black consciousness television shows, you know what I mean, Don King's, you know, setting up conscious debates and referees and shit like that. None of that has anything to do with moving us forward or progressively as a people. So what I wanted to do today was just really bring attention to that, and the fact that because our ancestors are leaving, what's happening now is that we are our own ancestors now. They are now functioning within our central nervous system, because now what's happening is that through all of these iPhone clouds and stuff like that, most of the iPhone cloud stuff and all of the radio transmissional information, all of that gets shot up into the ionosphere. And the ionosphere is where the ancestors basically would girdle the earth. So with all of this mass communication and all of these now iClouds and all this other stuff that's up there, it's making it harder for these ancestors when they bouncing to make the transition. So that's why you see so much rain. Like after Sabi died, it rained out here for like maybe like what, 5 days? 3 or 4 days? I think it was like 5. But I say all of that to say that when energy cannot be expressed, it winds up having to go within itself. And when it goes within itself now, it becomes implosive. And what's happening now in the conscious community is that we're becoming very implosive when it comes to our dissemination of actually what's happening to us. The conscious community, just like the general so-called black community, just like the so-called Moorish community, is under attack. Like right now, they doing this whole thing about Moors, and the Moors were the reason why the sister Corey Gaines, blessed the dead, was killed. How could that be? How could that be when it was the police that shot this woman? You know what I'm saying? That shot her allegedly and her son. If that indeed happened like that. Because what I'm starting to understand is that most of this false flag theater stuff that they doing is so repetitive and it's becoming so passe that once it happens, everybody is outraged for a second and then it's done. So instead of them trying to look into what cops was shot this woman, what the procedure was, what the protocols was, what does the black community do, they basically follow what CNN says, and now they trying to blame Moors for it. Or they trying to blame so-called sovereign citizens, which itself is an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a sovereign citizen. There's no such thing as a sovereign national. None of that shit exists, but it exists in the mind of the people. And now black people are so basically, so-called black people are so inundated with self-hatred or self-doubt that the minute that the news media puts out something like that, the black community is the one that runs with that. So now, of course, it's an issue now with the so-called Moors or whatever, because they have been trying to isolate and mitigate the Moors into a specific genre so that way they can target them. But the question is this. They saying, oh, well, the Moors did this. What Moors? What Moors you talking about? Which Moors? The Moors in L.A., the Moors in New York, the Moors under the ground, the Moors under the table? Like, what are you talking about? That's like saying, oh, well, the black man did it. What black man? Which one? The one that's light-skinned, dark-skinned, tall, short? It doesn't matter. Because what's happening now is what I'm starting to see is that not us, but certain members of our community are actually trying to fit the mold of what this thing is in order for them to have the attention on themselves so that way they can put themselves in a position to be some sort of fictitious leader for the community. But guess what? All of these niggas that's talking all of this stuff about Sadie, he was in jail for over a month. Where was he at? How come nobody said nothing? They knew he was there. So how come nobody picked up the phone, did a GoFundMe page, whatever? If I'd have known, I'd have tried to do something. And I wasn't even really rocking with him like that. But I respected the fact that as an elder, he represented a god within that pantheon. So just like him, he was Imhotep. So now that Imhotep is taken off the pantheon, what we left with the healing? Who we going to with that? Right? Same thing with Coakley. He could represent Amun because he was the hidden one. He was the one bringing the energy that we didn't know was there. You know what I'm saying? Same thing. Same thing. When it comes to all of this, we have to understand that generationally, we're in a different position. Matter of fact, I made some notes because sometimes, I'm getting a little older, so my memory. So I made a couple of notes so you understand which generation you in and how they target you. So within that, they have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They have a 6-generational interface. So the first generation was the baby boomers. That was 1945 to 1966. The next generation was Generation X. That's 1967 to 1980. Then we have Generation Y, which was 1980 to 1999, yep. And then we had Generation M, which is 2000 to 2010. Second to last, we have Generation Z, which is 2011 to 2020. And now the generation that everybody's really waiting for is Generation Alpha. That's Generation 2021 to 2040. Now the thing with these generational breakdowns is that each generation had something that they were bringing forth for the generation ahead. But the problem is, due to nepotism, due to generational nepotism, due to internal so-called white supremacist indoctrination of education, there is no direct interface now between the youth and the elders. You see what I'm saying? Because the elders were turned against the youth during, what was that? Generation Y and Generation M. They were the ones that turned against the youth. And then they are the so-called divorcee generation that led to the patchwork generation in which everybody's raising everybody else's kid. You understand? So it seemed like the farther we move into the future, the more dispersed the community becomes. Yet, what binds us as a community is the fact that we're supposed to have a certain level of consciousness that we share with each other. But how can we do that when all of our consciousness now is at war with each other? The Moors is banging on these, the Hebrews is banging on this one, the Egyptians is banging on the RBGs. It doesn't even matter. So really, it's not about now one generational doing this thing. This is about money. This is about people putting themselves in position to rule over other people at the fall, at the end of Rome, because that's what we are. when we talk about the reason why black people can't be unified, if we want to really do the knowledge to that, well, let's look historically why. Well, it didn't even start with this, but let's go to reason why. They say that we're not together, but every time we collectively come together and have a political infrastructure together, it gets broken down. How can we show and prove this? Well, let's go through history. The New York race riots of 1863, right? That's what deaded the so-called Seneca Village and all of that stuff that was there in New York. We had our own communities, our own political structure, all of that. We had our own burial grounds and all of that. What did they do? Killed all of them people off, turned that into Central Park, right? Then we have the Atlanta race riots of 1906. We have the Tennessee Knoxville race riots of 1919. We have the East St. Louis massacre of 1917. We have the Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's the only one people talk about, in 1921. And then we have the Rosewood massacre of 1923. And then let's move ahead now to modern era. We have the Move bombing of Philadelphia, where they bombed a whole city block of people, of Moors, who were getting themselves together and were learning the true science of equity and how to basically take themselves out of the corporate jurisdiction. So what did they do? They just bombed the whole city. They just bombed a whole block of people. And then what I'm understanding now is that, like with the situation that happened, I forget which brother was killed because there's so many of them is killed. But in any event, in one of them states, you had a black mayor, a black prosecutor, a black chief of police, and a black comptroller, and the brother still wound up getting killed by the so-called Caucasian police, and they still put him and got him off. You understand? So what we got to understand is that as much as it's about color, right, it's about taking the color and switching that into colorable law, because colorable law is what's destroying everybody. And because people put themselves under colorable influences, they don't understand that they have the right to step out and be a living soul. So let me tell you, man, stop blaming the Moors, stop blaming the RBGs, stop blaming each other, because we didn't get here by default. We got in here by design. So if we're going to design a way out of this situation, we have to get to a point where we stop pointing fingers at each other and stop trying to make it seem like somebody is better than the other. I know what I know based upon the fact that I went out there to try to get it. So it's the same thing with you. All of this information that we've been talking about all these years is now coming to pass. Is now coming to the point where we are officially in World War III. You have to understand, the Chinese done demilitarized the Southeastern Sea. You have the North Korea, who declared war on the same day they shot Anton Sterling. You have the United Nations. You have the police forces, the domestic police forces have been turned over to the UN right now. But they're doing it locally through incrementalism because they know that you niggas don't read. So what we have to understand is that what we need to start to do is look for solutions. Well, the solution starts with you. It starts with you deciding that I'm fed up and I can't take it anymore. So what I'm going to do is consolidate my identity, and I'm going to get this thing popping so that way when the boots do hit the ground, I have the chance to get out. I have the ability to function under international treaty, to function under the law or the family of nations, to be able to get what we need to do to move forward. So again, if you want to holler at me about some of these points or not, whatever. If you want to basically be right and get right, hit me up at houseofel@hotmail.com. Stop giving energy to people and things that don't exist, because it's killing you, it's killing your babies, and we're the only ones that can put ourselves in a higher octave if we start to listen to each other. Active listening leads to active participation. Be operative and not speculative. Be a noble, faithful Moor and not a dirty one. Islam, houseofel@hotmail.com. Peace.